This podcast was brought to you by an odd idea I had years ago. Time flies when you think about it.
Man, I feel old.
Hello and welcome to Monkey Broadcast, a monthly review and discussion show with me, the Jonin Monkey.
And me, Sven the Crusader. Please pay no mind to it if I sound like crap, because my pop filter decided to go limp and die.
That's unfortunate, but thankfully you'll have time to recover, as per tradition, this is the season finale! Yeah, we usually take a month break in December to experiment with other projects and, well, just, Christmas and wanted to have, just relax with families and all that.
Yeah, and in this case, I think it's especially fortuitous because depending on how November 8th goes, I may need a month to process the election results and stop drinking.
Yeah, that's the one disadvantage of recording things in advance. We have no idea how the election's gonna go, so future me will now insert a sound effect to suggest whether or not we are pleased with the results.
In other news,
But in the meantime, it's time for us to get into the first section of the last show of the year, which is
Q&A!
This is the section where we answer questions from the audience. If you'd like us to answer your questions, either leave them in the comments or send them to me via Twitter with the hashtag MBQuestion.
Our first question comes from McDuck, and I'm gonna have to think about this one.
What is the most epic fight scene you've seen in your dreams? Mine was SSJ4 Goku versus Perfect Blue Fat Cell.
Give me a moment to think of my dream diary. Jonin, over to you.
McDuck, I think you have a lot more interesting dreams than I do, because usually I just kind of hit the pillow and then everything else is kind of a weird haze.
I know that feeling.
I mean, don't get me wrong, I have imagined epic fight scenes in the past, just never in my sleep.
Yeah, and the thing is with me, most of my dreams are either Freud bafflingly weird or petting cats. Give you an example of the first one. I once dreamed that I was, from my own first-person perspective, watching Ulquiorra from Bleach in Alice's Wonderland.
Huh.
Unfortunately, that imagination has never translated over into fight scenes, unless you count the one time I dreamed of Nanashi versus Luolong, but that happened.
Yeah, well, I guess technically it's an epic fight scene, but...
Well, I mean, it is epic, but it's less death battle and more grounded.
That's true. I have sort of vague memories of when I was younger, vague power-related dreams when I was a kid, but I can't remember who I was fighting against, so it could have been anything. Maybe, depending on what my childhood state was, it could either be some kind of Freudian archetype of all the troubles I was facing at the time, or it could have just been a giant marshmallow. I really don't know.
Well, to be fair, a Jonin Monkey versus a giant marshmallow is something I would pay to see. Unless that giant marshmallow was Kirby, in which case you're boned, because in one fan death battle, Kirby beats Superman.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine bizarre fights. Like, part of me is tempted to, make an insane wrestling parody series, but in terms of my dreams, these days I just tend to fall asleep as soon as I hit the pillow, really.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And like I said, most of my dreams are just random collections of that would baffle all of the noted psychologists. So, I really have no solid answer either.
So, keep dreaming, Luffy McDuck. You're definitely coming up with more interesting stuff there than we are at the moment, so...
Yeah, and if you ever get the inclination, please feel free to write your dreams down as fan death battles.
Well, knowing Luffy McDuck, you'll probably turn them into comics, which is even better, so...
Please do that, Luffy. You're our only hope. Wait, what?
Wrong series. The next batch of questions are mainly Pokemon related, partially because of the 25th anniversary, and also because, well, I have a lot of Pokemon questions, so it's easy to get them all out of the way. The first comes from Vice of Legend, and he asks,
The main Pokemon games haven't had a third version for a while now. Black and White got Black and White 2, but X and Y got nothing. Is the third version of a main series game dead, and how would a third version work with Sun and Moon?
Well, I can pretty well give my answer to that last question by saying I would have to play the games first. As for the rest of the question, I think it might be, and I think I might know why. Eventually, people just kinda got tired of the gimmick.
Yeah, I can understand that. I mean, a lot of this kind of thing was phased out. Some people might say it was phased out because of updated patches, but those very rarely happen with Pokemon. But yeah, otherwise I think you're right, Sven, because I remember when Emerald came out, there was a magazine review that said, yeah, Emerald is a really great game, but it kind of makes us feel what was the point of Ruby and Sapphire in the first place. I get the fact that the third game existed to respond to fan feedback and improve the games. Platinum is a much better game than Diamond and Pearl was initially. But at the same time, that kind of thing really works better if it's a remastered version like Heart Gold and Soul Silver was. When you're releasing them just like a year afterwards, it does make you think, well, great, I now have to pay 30 quid again for the privilege.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's why it's pretty much done and dusted at this point. I think if they were going to make a third version of Sun and Moon, which I don't even know if that's possible, because at the time of recording, Sun and Moon is about 10-20 days away, and we don't know anything about it yet, but if they were going to release the third version, I think it would be more like a DLC expansion, or like a priced down version of the game, rather than a full separate experience on its own.
Yeah, and actually kinda like Fire Emblem Fates Revelations, now that I think of it. And honestly, I think that would work out a lot better for Game Freak.
Actually, yeah, that is a good point now that I think about it. Revelations is a good example of that.
And I mean, say what you will about Nintendo's obvious money scheme with Fire Emblem Fates, it was money well spent.
That is true. Plus, I will say, whilst I don't think a third version is absolutely necessary, if nothing else, it will, at the very least, give a purpose to the third legendary that inevitably pops up, because we've had that happen so many times throughout the generations, where even though they've just stuck with the two games, there's still that third legendary that is supposed to be what I presume would be the basis of a third game, but it never gets used. Like, you had a Zingrande in X and Y, you had Q-Rem, who, in fairness, got involved in Black and White too, but otherwise, in the initial Black and White, it really didn't do much, So yeah, if nothing else, it would make those Pokemon a bit more relevant, rather than a one spin-off movie, but otherwise, if it is going to happen at all, it would probably be a DLC expansion. Otherwise, I think it is just dead and buried. And in fairness, if they do actually focus on getting the initial games right the first time, I don't think we'll have too much to worry about.
Yeah, and judging by the fact that we've had just the two standalone games since the 5th generation, they've been getting better at that. So, yeah, basically what Jonin said. Our next question from IZ reads,
What are some steps you think the Pokemon anime can take to improve itself while still maintaining its current demographic? By that I mean no uber edgy shifts or sudden character deaths.
IZ, have you ever been paying attention to me and how much I hate edgy character deaths? Of course I wouldn't suggest that.
Yeah, I think he's more doing it because there are so many people suggesting it at the moment. I don't know why.
Yeah, I don't either. Although I will say, Pokemon almost kind of hinted at that route during the 4th gen anime, because Cyrus and Pokemon Hunter J both totally died.
Yeah, I've not seen that episode, so I can't comment on that.
Yeah, then again, I suppose Cyrus maybe could have died in Gen 4. We never really figured that out.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I'll be honest, I've been kind of losing a lot of love for the Pokemon anime, so maybe I'm not the best person to talk about it, but if I had to come up with one reason, it would be, well, there are two main ways I would improve it. The first is breaking the damn formula.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. The biggest improvement the Pokemon anime could take, for God's sake, let Ash learn something.
Yeah, that's kind of the big problem. I mean, Izzy posted another question in the queue, which was along the lines of, do you think Ash will ever win the Pokemon League, and what will your reaction be if he does? People say one of the problems with the anime is that Ash never wins tournaments, except even with my on and off knowledge of the Pokemon anime, I can tell you that, yeah, he actually has won tournaments. He won the Orange League. I don't know if he won the Coral League, but he came close, and he actually did defeat all of the Frontier Brains and was actually offered a chance to become a Frontier Brain himself, so he has actually won significant competitions and accolades. The problem is we have to go back to the formula, have to have him go through a continent, go through the gym leaders, and yeah, like Sven says, he has to keep forgetting lessons he's learned along the way.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Season 2 of The Legend of Korra was egregious, but this is absurd.
Yeah, and that's... People have mentioned to me multiple times, like, oh, the writing gets better in the black and white anime, or, oh, you should see X and Y, it's got all of these character arcs going on, but the thing is, I find egregious is that, yeah, I'm sure there are episodes where there are character arcs, and they are interesting, but the amount of times I've dipped into the series and see that each episode has gone back to the exact same formula again of, Ash is still wandering aimlessly through the countryside to go on the Pokemon League. Hello, I am insert name here, and this is my Pokemon we wish you to buy this week. We are currently working as insert jobs here, and we have a problem with social issue.
Yeah.
Q Ash and friends tried to fix it, then Team Rock Kid shenanigans, they blast off again, and that somehow fixes the problem.
Yeah, I mean, there's really no better way to put it. This is exactly how Pokemon has been going since I was 5. And to think I thought One Piece was immortal.
Yeah, and part of the reason, again, why I don't go with the people who keep telling me, oh, X and Y has gotten really better in terms of writing. I fell for that once before. The last time I got really excited for the Pokemon anime, or at least was interested enough to watch for the first couple of episodes, was... I forget what they called the first series based on Ruby and Sapphire. I think they called it Pokemon Advance, something like that. But anyway, around the time that season was starting, big things were happening. Ash had finally defeated Gary in a one-on-one duel, and then got kicked out the league by someone using a Blaziken. He then goes home, and he does something that was hinted ages ago, but no one thought it would actually happen. He buys a new bike for Misty, which essentially means that she has no reason to follow him around anymore. And the two of them say goodbye, and then Brock goes his separate ways from Ash, and Ash is then told by Professor Oak, Gary's decided to leave every Pokemon except for his starter, and he's gonna go to Hoenn to explore. And Ash says, okay, I'll do the same. I'll leave all my Pokemon behind, save for Pikachu, and we'll go to this new world. And admittedly, Brock came back 2 episodes afterwards, so what the hell was the point in that? But he entered a new world, and he then teamed up with the anime's version of May, who was something interesting because she was now the new Pokemon trainer, and Ash was having to be a kind of mentor role. And eventually she started entering Pokemon contests, which was something interesting. It meant we could break up the formula a bit by having some episodes be gym battles and some episodes be contests, which didn't follow the formula and were more exciting. Unfortunately, the rest of the count then started being filled with the exact same repetition of the formula, and then I realised, oh, they've learned nothing.
Yeah, rinse and repeat for, how many seasons has it been now? 19?
Oh god, I've lost count at this point.
And the thing is, it's really sad, because the first 2 series of Pokemon were actually pretty decent. Cheesy as hell and horribly localized, but still pretty decent. But you can only have so much of that one thing so many times. It would be like eating chicken and rice every single day from the age of 5 to the age of 24.
Yeah, and it's hard to think about how they would get around it, because people insist that Pokemon Origins, the anime that was eventually released to coincide with the anniversary, and its follow-up Pokemon Generations, is, quote, what the anime should have been. I don't think that's entirely fair to compare. I mean, well, first of all, because Origins has its own problems, a hell of a lot of pacing problems, and the fact that Red seems to have the same fixation on Charizard that Ash has with his Pikachu, but, the thing is, that series, it knows it's only got about 4 episodes, so it has to keep the plot progressing. The Pokemon anime is a marketing machine that, as far as it's concerned, is gonna go on forever.
Yeah, and frankly, unless the Pokemon game series ends, which people have been theorizing, but I won't get into that, this thing really is going to be immortal. It will be around after One Piece has crumbled into dust. And as far as theoretically how to make it better, either just break the formula and let Ash develop, or get rid of Ash.
Yeah, I honestly think that the time he was offered the chance to become a Frontier Brain, that should have been the moment when we transferred to a new protagonist, but no, that didn't happen.
Frankly, I would have watched it if Ash had been promoted and we had been given Dawn.
Yeah, that could have been interesting. Personally, the other thing I would change about it, I would do something akin to what Beyblade G Revolutions did, which this is something I ended up watching when I was younger just because there was nothing better to do. Basically, Beyblade was very similar to Pokemon in the sense that it had like an annoying protagonist, and it was pretty much just about these over-the-top Beyblade tournaments that were essentially possessed by Pokemon-like creatures known as Bit Beasts. And then the second season, Beyblade V-Force cranked it up to 11 by having evil organizations dedicated to capturing these Bit Beasts and creating their own cyber Bit Beasts, and then invisible Bit Beasts, and then Bit Beasts that were revised from fossils, all to take over the world using children spinning tops. But
wow! While you go on, I'm gonna try and process that.
Yeah, but the reason I bring up G Revolutions is because after that point, the series decided to take a sudden shift in tone and say, okay, look, the Bit Beasts, they don't exist. If we do show them, it's only to make the attacks look cooler symbolically, but otherwise, no. We're just gonna make this a straight-up sports anime that focus more on the idea of the tournament and the team breaking up because they're tired of living under the protagonist's shadow and want to stand on their own, and it was actually a lot more interesting for it, I'm not gonna lie. So, I'm thinking that's what Pokemon should do, like, because you've got everything you need in the Pokemon anime and just the very concept of Pokemon to make it a sports movie. You have a kid from a backwater town training up small creatures, cue epic training montage, and then having them turn into giant monsters that can take on the world champions.
Oh my god, it's true!
So, yeah, I would basically dispense of the fantasy adventure stuff that the Pokemon anime keeps bringing up. Like, you mentioned, what was her name? Pokemon Hunter J, was it?
Yeah.
That is just one example of the elements. I mean, okay, we established that Team Rocket were Pokemon thieves, but she takes the concept up to ridiculous levels. Like, she has a flying battleship, she has, like, specially customized Pokemon balls, she freezes the Pokemon in status, like, basically turning them into stone and keeps them in stone statues, again, as opposed to just having a sodding Pokeball. It's just, that's when you're kind of going, okay, this is my suspension of disbelief, and you've just thrown it off the cliff and it's still plummeting.
Never, until that point, we never thought it was possible to take Team Rocket up to 11.
I would almost say it goes up to 12, but anyway. So yeah, that would be my way of improving the Pokemon anime. Essentially just grounding it a little bit more and getting rid of the whole formulaic nature of it, but That's just my opinion, because there are people who still really, really enjoy the Pokemon anime for whatever reason, so, yeah.
Most of them are ages 12 through 14.
I have seen older people who are fans of it, but I digress.
Oh my god, you poor people. And as far as my opinion goes, yeah, basically the same. Also, please let the canon villain teams shine more. You had the perfect chance for a new plot in Black and White. I mean, come on. Plasma and Getsus, they had the best plot line in the Pokemon franchise. And you whiffed it to focus on Team Rocket. Why again?
Well, it's in order to make Jesse and James credible villains for a couple of episodes.
That literally lasted like 5 episodes.
Sigh.
At this point, I think the Game Freak anime developers just have an unbreakable phobia of change.
Unfortunately, yes. Anyway, moving on. This is Isaac's next question, which... We're taking a small break from the Pokemon game questions just because, well, this one's going to be interesting.
You, Sven, and Richard are transported to an alternate dimension where everyone is different. For example, Scientist is now a mage, Pervert is now a priest, Thinking Violet is now a professional speaker, etc. How would your alternate selves act and what would they do?
So, basically, it's the karmic version of D&D. This is an amazing question, but give me time to think about it.
Bizarrely, the original audio of my answer disappeared from the recording, so allow me to do this again. My alternate self would be very impulsive, have a lot of confidence in himself to the point of flat-out arrogance, is really interested in sports, not particularly interested in making people laugh or enjoying movies and video games beyond the service level, and is intolerant of most people that aren't him.
Honestly, I could go into a lot of depth right now, but I'm just gonna be a self-deprecating smartass and say that in an alternate universe, I would actually get things done. What a beautiful existence that would be.
True, although I have a feeling that my alternate self would definitely not be doing podcasts. It's like, I'm out of action! I've no time to talk!
Oh my god. The way you described yourself, you'd legitimately be Donald Trump.
Sorry, my blood's run cold.
I'm sorry, too, for putting that image in your head.
Quickly moving on, I think... Well, if I was going to include the sketch character Richard, I would say he is very nice, liked kittens, and was really too shy and didn't really want to draw attention to himself, really.
So, basically what you're saying is, to compare Richard and his Bizarro World counterpart would be like to, or a slight side street. I'm a part of a Fire Emblem Path of Radiance fandom, and just recently we released a blooper reel, in which one of the bloopers involved our Black Knight accidentally affecting a voice completely the opposite of his character, and basically, comparing Richard and his Bizarro World counterpart would be like comparing the Black Knight with Elmer Fudd Knight.
You brought the sacred sword. Sacred? You brought the sacred sword, didn't you, Ike? Yeah, you did.
Almost, yes, except it would be kind of more quiet and like, hi, I'm Richard, but you don't have to pay attention to me. Go away, go away.
He'd be the nerdy scholar, oh god.
Okay. He would also not be able to wear metal because of allergies. Anyway.
So he'd be like Buddy Ebsen in the original draft of The Wizard of Oz. Moving on.
Indeed, yes. And things are only going to get stranger from here.
Oh, here we go. Our next question comes from Toon Junkie.
Is Snorlax carnivorous, or have I been doing him a disservice by having him devour all of my opponent's Pokemon?
Sweet Jesus, Toon Junkie!
My short and sweet answer is yes. Yes, you have been doing a disservice.
Feed him Pokeblocks, for God's sake! What have you been doing?
Also, on a side note, why would you think Snorlax was carnivorous? I mean, I can understand you making that mistake with something like Feraligatr, which, you know, has massive jaws, but...
Yeah, but, I mean, if anything, Snorlax must exist on nothing but Cheetos and Rice Krispie treats, kind of like me, in order to be that size. So again, why were you feeding him your opponents?
Yeah, plus, I think Snorlax only has 2 teeth.
Oh my god, I don't even want to know what Toon Junkie has done is even physically possible. Toon Junkie, what have you been doing with the blender?
I'm now going to swiftly move on to Toon Junkie's other question of the last one of the year.
I'm building a flying boat, and I was wondering what would be the best material to generate the anti-gravitons I need for sustained flight.
You know, long ago I experimented with antimatter popcorn, and I think that might work. I mean, it's light and airy too, so there's that, and if by any chance you run out of food on board, you can eat it in a pinch so long as you don't mind taking the risk of sudden existential crisis.
And on that weird note, that concludes the Q&A session for this year's Monkey broadcast. As always, thank you so much for sending these questions, and feel free to send us a whole load more next year, because we go all over the place in this section, but we love it for that.
Yeah, pretty much. I repeat Jonin's call to questions because a while back we almost ran completely out, so please fill us back up.
Indeed, yes. But with all that said and done, it's now time for us to get into the next section, which is...
Reviews!
This is the section where the two of us review something we've read, watched, or played. And this month, both of us have subjects which we don't talk about very much. And I'll go first since I have a feeling my review's going to be shorter. It's a series that... well, I've kind of talked on a similar medium with it for Thunderbirds, but it's a series called Thunderbolt Fantasy, and it is basically Kung Fu puppets.
This can only end well.
Yeah, it was an interesting show from the last anime season. I mean, technically it's not anime, but it counts enough to be shown on Crunchyroll, so I'm not complaining. It was the show that came about because, okay, this is a more paraphrased version of the story. I'm sure I'm skimming over some details, but it's still a nice story anyway. It came about because a writer known as Gen Urobuchi was in holiday in Taiwan at the time, and whilst there he was contacted by a Taiwan studio named Philly, which specialised in a form of puppetry which, I forget the Taiwanese name, but it literally translates to something like cloth bag puppet. They were actually just inviting him around the studio, and they were saying things like, oh, it'd be really great if you could write a production for us, and Gen Urobuchi's paraphrased reaction was something along this lines. Oh my god, this is awesome. You do this with puppets? How do you make puppets look this good? Wait, this is only shown in Taiwan? Why is this not a thing in Japan? Oh, wait a minute, I'm gonna make this a thing. Hello, Japanese studios, this is Gen Urobuchi here. Okay, I've got this show pitch for you. Kung Fu puppets. Yes, I know it sounds bad, but come on. I gave you Fate Stroke Zero, I gave you Psycho Pass, I gave you Madoka freaking Magica. I think I'm good, trust me on this.
Mad anime science.
Indeed. So, this is how Thunderbolt Fantasy came about, and, well, let me put it this way. I'm more of a casual anime fan now. Like, I don't do what most anime fans do, which is binge watch everything in the season, because if nothing else I don't have the time. But I do keep up with the occasional show, and Thunderbolt Fantasy is the first show in literally years that has gotten me to reactivate my premium subscription so I can watch it without ads and see the next episode when it comes out.
Go on.
It's not exactly the deepest show. It does have a big part of the appeal is the fact that it is a really entertaining action show. Like, it is puppet version of wuxia, which is basically the kind of superpowered kung fu that shows like Dragon Ball Z are based on. And it's just an amazing show to look at. And there are some people who say that the only reason people are so excited about it is because it uses puppets, which is just a gimmick. But honestly, whilst the exciting action is entertaining to watch on its own, what elevates the show for me from something which I would go, Okay, this is absolutely stupid, but I love it just because of the over-top action and inherent silliness of it all. Because Geno Obochi is involved, he actually is managed to make a very simple story and something that's engaging to the point where, as the show went on, I actually kind of forgot that they were puppets in a sense, and just was more invested in what the characters were actually doing, which actually says a lot now that I think about it. But yeah, just to explain the premise quickly, there is an evil group known as the... Oh dear. If I could just quickly say one thing before I go on to explain the premise, there is one issue I have with it, and that is a product of the dubbing/localization process, because the show was... Okay, Geno Obochi wrote the script in Japanese. It was then translated back into Taiwanese, and they filmed all of the puppets saying all the dialogue in Taiwan. It was then redubbed in Japanese, and when they did that, they changed all of the names. And Crunchyroll kept the Japanese dub, but used the Taiwan names. So...
Oh, God!
So what you have is the subtitles are saying one thing, but the dub is saying something else entirely. And this wouldn't be so bad, but the Taiwan names have all of these accents on them, so I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce them. Like, the main protagonist, for example, it's written as Shan Bu Huan, but the A's and the U's have accents upon them, so I don't know if it's actually Shen Bu Han or Shen Bu Han. You know, that's...
Yeah, I'm of no help there, because the only accent marks over names that I'm familiar with are over Spanish and French names, especially French names. We'll get into that.
Indeed, so... And the audio cut out again. Long story short, I'll be using the Chinese names since they're the ones that come up the most in the subs, but I have no guide for the pronunciation, so forgive me if I butcher it. Anyway, a group of evil swordsmen known as the Zhang invade a sacred ground in order to obtain a legendary sword known as the Heaven Retribution Sword, which is supposed to have slain many demons long ago. To do this, they slaughter most of the clan, apart from one young girl named Dan Fei, who steals the sword's guard so it can't be complete. But she doesn't get very far, as the evil swordsmen very easily pick up her trail and start to follow her. While she's running away, just when it looks like there's no hope, a traveller named Shan Bu Huan steps into the fray and saves her life. Though I should mention not by his choice, cause he was manipulated by a mystical Gandalf-like figure named Lin Zeya, who basically manipulated him into doing one good deed, and by doing so, gets a bounty put on Shan Bu Huan's head.
As you do, I guess?
When Shan comes back to complain, and when Danfei wakes up and explains the situation, Lin Zeya, upon realizing that it's the Heaven Retribution Sword on the line, decides that the best thing to do is to form a party of individuals with unique skills, by which I mean one of them's a ridiculously good archer, and one of them's an ancient martial arts master, and another one is a demonic necromancer.
One of these things is not like the others.
Yeah, and he's going to form a party with Shang in tow, unwittingly, because his plan is to charge straight into the headquarters of the evil organization, making his way past the various obstacles in order to take down the group once and for all. And the only reason Shan's coming along is because, well, you've got to get rid of the bounty somehow. And he insists they're only travelling the same direction. He has not been manipulated, damn it.
Like anime Han Solo.
Actually, that is the perfect way to describe Shang.
Awesome!
Wow, it is. The more I think about it, the more it works, because he's not motivated by money, but he makes it clear that he's only just arrived in town, and frankly, he doesn't want anything to do with this, but if they're gonna set a bounty on him, he might as well clear it up.
And I mean, Han was only motivated by money in the sense that he had to get a bounty off his head, so, you know.
Wow, it is actually amazingly fitting the more I think about it.
You can chalk me up, by the way, as all the more interested now.
as you can gather, it is an incredibly simple premise, but it still really works. Like I said, a big part of that is Gen Urobuchi adding little bits and pieces in there to elevate what is essentially an RPG quest into something that is more engaging and has enough twists and turns in there so that you're not always guessing what's going to happen and it's not too predictable. And because of that, I'm going to keep this short, partially due to time, but also because as much as I want to talk about specific scenes, I have a feeling that doing so would kind of kill the surprise, and a lot of the big moments come simply from the fact that, holy crap, I did not see that coming. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a reversal of what I've been doing the past 2 months with the Heavenly Sword movie and Bleach. I've been basically structuring the reviews around a certain number of key points in which they failed. I'm going to use 3 key points of what made Thunderbolt Fantasy such an entertaining watch for me. The first is that cliches can be interesting if you add slight tweaks to them. I mentioned Dan Fei. Dan Fei, initially she is going to present it as a very archetypical figure, like kind of naive, but on the other hand, she has a good heart, and she's the one that's defending these swords in the first place. So she's the one that's gently explaining how this sword, it's the one thing protecting the Earth, so naturally we should do everything in our power to protect it. In any other series, she would be, I'm trying to think of the best example, kind of like Colette Van Tells the Symphonia, basically the one that's always pure and right about everything in most arguments.
Yeah, basically, uncorruptible pure pureness.
Basically, yeah. But what makes her interesting is that there are, again, slight tweaks to the cliche that shows that she's not quite as, I guess, perfect, for lack of a better term, as she seems, because she goes to talk to Shang one night during their journey, because Shang is still doing the whole thing of, look, I'm joining you guys, but I really don't want to be a part of it. And she thinks that, okay, if I just go in and explain just how powerful this sword is and what it can do, then he will join us. So she starts doing that, but Shang interrupts her and says, you do realise I have run into multiple clans over the years who have all said we have super duper powerful legendary swords, and a good chunk of them have turned out to be forgeries, right? And she responds, well, okay, yes, I'm sure multiple clans have done that, but I assure you that the sword is the real thing, and it is going to destroy the world, especially if it falls into evil hands. Okay then, so if that's true, why didn't you use it? What? Well, if you used the sword against the evil group when they first showed up, if it was a forgery, they would have laughed and gone away. If it was real, then you could have solved this problem within 5 seconds flat and we wouldn't be in this situation.
Ha! Man, I wonder how many Fire Emblem games could have been solved with that exact same logic.
Yeah, so because of that, it's revealed that Dan Fei's holiness is... It's less to do with a purity of a character and more the fact that because she's been raised on the clan's traditions, she literally has not thought of concepts like that before, because she's considered even touching the sword to be taboo. So that's kind of the interesting premise for her character, is that she sticks to tradition even when people point out, you do realise it's probably not going to work at this stage.
You know, I've never really heard of a series actually going in depth on their holy character's amazing naivety.
I could list multiple examples of this, but that's basically one thing it does, which is it doesn't necessarily deepen the character, but puts them in an interesting angle so that it makes them more interesting to watch. And this leads me into my second point. It's kind of difficult to explain, but it manages to achieve great things with little things. Like, I've talked about the action sequences. They're not very long. They only last for about 2 to 3 minutes tops, but when they do, holy crap, because the action is fast and intense. There is all sorts of calling out attacks, and they are some of the most ridiculous, over-the-top names. Like, one battle ends with one person screaming Festering Boneheart, and the other one screaming Spectral Shattering.
Wow! You know, out of context, I would have thought those were the names of black metal bands.
Indeed, but it achieves a lot partially by, well, just the sheer speed, choreography, and energy that's put into the fights, and it also helps that there's an additional story reason behind said fight, whether it's revealing just how strong a character is, or putting them on the backbench when they realised, oh shoot, maybe we can't take on this guy like we first thought. And what also helps elevating is the soundtrack produced by, oh, I forget his first name, but Suwano. The guy who, in case you don't know, was behind the soundtracks to Guilty Crown and Enola Zero.
I'm suddenly having very vivid memories of Death Battle right now.
Yep, mainly for the song MK Allies, which, yeah, there are very similar songs like it. There's only about 12 tracks in the entire soundtrack, but the show makes good use of them, especially since there is one song called Thunderbolt Fantasy, because for some reason it's Thunder, capital letters, Bolt, but anyway, it's such an epic theme when you hear it in battles, because it has that whole thing where it starts off with this choir build-up, which is usually the moment when someone gets to say something badass, and then the trumpets slowly come in, and then it kicks in with this big bombastic vocal chorus, and it's just... God, it's amazing.
You know, this guy really seems to love big bombastic vocal choruses after lead-ups.
I'm not complaining.
Me either.
And it also does that with foreshadowing as well, and that's kind of what makes rewatching it interesting as well, because the initial reactions to the last two episodes is that people keep insisting they feel like Deus Ex Machina because they just come out of nowhere. First off, that's not what Deus Ex Machina means, but,
yeah, Deus Ex Machina kind of implies amazing convenience.
Well, partially that, and also it's a greater power solving problems with the heroes, but it's a pet peeve of mine. But, I don't consider it arse pulls either, because when you go back, you actually do find out that, yes, there were actually foreshadows in there. They were just in one or two comments that you didn't reflect on at the time, but then, when you go back, you realize, oh, right, he said that, which is why that happened. Okay, so... I really wish I could give more definite examples, but again, spoilers, so...
Yeah, that's fair.
It manages to, even if it's a simple plot, it makes it a bit more engaging, and that leads me into my third and final point. The characters are not overly complex. They have a very basic personality, and that's kind of how it's going to be from start to finish. But what the show is, if not taught me, then at the very least reminded me, is that even if your characters are simplistic, what can make them come alive and be more interesting is how they interact in a party. Like I said, Lin Sui's Ya brings an interesting collection of people together, which, it seems, okay, yeah, we've got this party together that can take on anything, but then you kind of realise the more they spend time together that you've got one half of the party that is idealists who are charging into the fray based on the heroism of the thing, and the other half are cynical bastards looking for the first chance to backstab each other.
You know, there are days I wonder why that doesn't happen more often.
Yeah, so that's really part of the reason why it becomes so engaging, is because you have all of these different personalities interacting in different ways, and either try to gauge just what the hell they're about, or trying to get themselves in a more favourable position. Like, one of my favourite scenes in the entire series is a conversation in a restaurant between Sha Wu Shen, who has the most awesome nickname, Screaming Phoenix Killer.
Yeah, I'm familiar with this guy.
A conversation between him and Shang, which is incredibly engaging because it's a conversation between Shang, who has a personality that's a combination between nonchalant and mildly grumpy, and Sha Wu Shen, who is a calm but murderous psychopath.
Yeah, so basically my entire career as a voice actor.
Basically, yeah. In fact, I will be honest, I have been tempted to fandom some of these scenes, and I am tempted to get you to play him. But anyway,
You know me well.
And that's really part of the reason why I ended up being so immersed in this series, is not because they're complex characters, but more just seeing how they're going to interact with each other, especially when you have the linchpin in the middle of it all, Lin Shui Ya, who is definitely the combination of all 3 points, because I described him as the Gandalf that brings the group together. I guess the more accurate description would be Gandalf if Gandalf was a chaotic, neutral, manipulative bastard.
So a bit closer to Dumbledore than Gandalf.
Probably, yeah. I haven't seen enough of Harry Potter to confirm that, but yeah. Basically, I mentioned before that he kind of manipulates Shan to do it, but really, his whole character is the manipulator, to the point where he admits that, yeah, I've decided I'm going to dedicate the rest of my life to manipulating people. That's how much I enjoy it, so...
Basically, he's Richard's obsession with doing evil just narrowed to a fine point.
Yeah, well, it's not even evil, and that's the reason why I said chaotic neutral, because the way he explains it is that he enjoys it, and it doesn't matter if it's hero or villain, though he admits villains are slightly more fun because heroes are so trusting anyway, and it's a little bit too easy at times.
So let me get this straight. He's a version of the stock anime villain who basically loves hunting humans, except his hunt is just f***ing with them.
Basically, yeah. And what makes that great is that in any other series he would be the figure like a Sherlock or an Eisen figure who would have plans within plans within plans that would be outthinking everyone every step of the way. But the show shows that whilst he is a very skilled manipulator, because he's stuck in that mindset, he not only misses some very obvious solutions at times, it also has a tendency to screw himself over. One example I can give, because it's fairly early game, the reason that Sha Wu Shen pops into the story is because he is someone Lin screwed over previously, and it apparently never occurred to him that someone he defeated might want revenge at a later stage.
Okay, so he legitimately is a charming version of an internet troll.
More or less, yeah.
Man, Loki would be proud.
So yeah, I could go on, but that sums up the reason I freaking love Thunderbolt Fantasy, and it's the reason why it's the most engaged I've been. Again, it's kind of weird to call it an anime because it doesn't really qualify, but it was my favourite product of the last season, and yeah, I just had a blast watching it from beginning to end. And they've announced the second season next year, which I am so happy.
Not gonna lie, I kind of am too, and I've never even seen it.
If you want to watch it, it's on Crunchyroll. You don't have to get the premium account, so as long as you can stomach adverts, then the entire series is up there to watch. And yeah, whilst I do wish the subtitles had been improved, or at the very least companies could just stick to a series of names, I cannot recommend it enough. It may not be the most complex show in the world, but if you want an engaging thrill ride, or just any kind of superpower come through movie, just go and watch it. Seriously, you're not gonna find anything like it for a while.
Well, considering I've desperately needed new anime to watch for years, I think I might just do that.
But hey, and I've talked long enough about this, so Sven, over to you.
Right. Since the torch has been passed to me, fellow journeyman on this road of nerdiness, let me take you into the magical realm of musical theater. Specifically, allow me to take you from Taiwan to France. Because today, ladies and gentlemen, to my own astonishment, I'm reviewing Les Miserables. More or less all of Les Miserables.
Yeah, this is gonna be interesting, well, for two reasons. First off, I don't think we've ever covered musicals before on this show.
Unless you count Disney, and I'm not even sure we've covered... Actually, we talked about The Lion King 2, Simba's Pride, which I've also been watching recently. But that's as close as we've come.
Yep, and the second is you're pretty much going to be on your own because the closest I've ever been to Les Miserables is watching the Nostalgia Critics review of it, and I seriously doubt that qualifies.
Yeah, for one, he only reviewed the 2012 film, which isn't the best introduction. And for two, even then it was a very limited picture, so hopefully I'd be able to give something of a more detailed picture. And as a basic summary, Les Miserables was an 1862 novel published by Victor Hugo, which has since been adapted into oblivion. And I'm going to start off this review by saying that it is astonishingly appropriate and really funny that I'm reviewing Les Miserables just before the election, because for some reason, a certain candidate got it into his great big orange head that the iconic song of Les Miserables, Do You Hear the People Sing, would be a great campaign theme. Now, I'd like to take a moment to address Mr. Trump. I know you and your followers are allergic to facts, but if you had taken the time to do research, you would know that Les Miserables is, at its core, a tract opposing tyranny on the part of the French government. You would also know that Victor Hugo got kicked out of France for being too left-wing, so good job.
Oh, God.
I'm not going to talk too much about the book, except maybe in relation to how certain actors portray certain characters, because there's a reason the fandom calls the book The Brick. I'll give you a hint, it's long. So in this review, I'm going to be focusing on the 4 versions that I've happened to watch in the course of the last month. Yeah, I've had a musical theater problem. The 10th anniversary concert in 1995, the 2010 25th anniversary edition, the 2011 West End edition, and of course, the infamous film.
Yes. Now, remind me what the premise is again. The only things I remember about the premise are the French Revolution is involved. It involves a thief named Javert going up against a guy named Jean Valjean, I think.
Other way around, but close.
And it has multiple time skips. That's about all I know.
That's a surprisingly concise summary of the plot, actually. The story follows former convict and, spoiler, future parole violator Jean Valjean as he goes about his 19 years of his life in 1832 France during the period of the First French Revolution. Apparently there were a lot of them. And in the process, he becomes a successful businessman, adopts a daughter to his name, among other things, including fighting for said revolution. All the while he is opposed by the very definition of lawful neutral, Inspector Javert.
And I believe he was the one played by Russell Crowe in the infamous movie.
Yeah, I'll get into that. And although the focus is on Jean Valjean and Javert, there are a multitude of other characters making up the cast and crew, so there's a good bit to talk about. And rather than trying to run down the plot because mentioning just about anything will spoil the uninitiated, and I know that there are still uninitiated because I was until I watched the movie, I'm going to go into depth about the respective quality of adaptation on the part of each separate play. And to do that, I'm going to run down a list of characters. I'm going to run down this list of the cast in order of vaguely least to most crucial to the plot, and I'll list which adaptation I think did the best job of them. To start off with, since they're just shy of major cast status, Best Enjolras, Aaron Tveit in the movie, and Best Grandpère, Adam Linstead in the 2011 West End edition. To start things off, I think I will talk for a moment about more or less the only characters in Les Miserables who can outwardly be considered villains. The Thénardiers. Or as they are in the story, the former keepers of Valjean's adoptive daughter Cosette, and basically the scum of the earth.
Oh.
Jonin will know them for being played by Sacha Baron Cohen and Helena Bonham Carter in the film, I believe.
Oh yeah, that's right. If they're villains, I think that review may have skimmed over their role quite a bit.
Yeah, then again, yeah, that review skimmed over quite a few things, but, yeah.
It's Doug Walker, that doesn't surprise me, but continue.
But basically, the Thénardiers are a pair of less than scrupulous innkeepers who gleefully serenade the fact that they rip off their guests like nobody's business. And to me, there are 3 standout performances of these characters. And I'll get out of the way immediately who I think played the best Madame Thénardier, because she's been played practically by only one person for the last 31 years. And that, of course, is Jenny Galloway, who brings the ham. And it's just generally a lot of fun, which is the point of the Thénardiers in the play. They're sort of, what Mayuri Kuretsuchi could have been. The characters who are disgustingly evil, but at the same time they're gut-bustingly funny.
Master of the house isn't worth my spit. Comforter, philosopher, and lifelong cunning little brain, regular Voltaire. Thinks he's quite a lover, but there's not much.
Okay. So she's been in about 3 of the adaptations you mentioned, then?
Yeah. She started in the original adaptation in 1985, went on to the 10th anniversary, went on to the 25th anniversary, and has played Madame Thénardier in several adaptations in between. So, as much as I like Helena Bonham Carter, as much as she is a fantastic actress, she really can't stand up to that, and there's also the fact that she sounded bored all throughout the movie.
I guess that makes sense. I mean, it would be like someone trying to take over from David Chuzet as Poirot. I mean, no matter how good they are, there's someone who's been that character for over 35 years.
Yeah. And on that note, the 3 standout performances of Monsieur Thénardier I would classify as Alan Armstrong, the original, Sacha Baron Cohen, self-explanatory, and my personal favorite, Matt Lucas, who so far is the only person of those 3 who has been able to match Jenny Galloway's ham.
Food beyond compare, food beyond belief. Mix it in a mincer and pretend it's beef. Kidney of a horse, liver of a cat. Filling up the sausages with this and that. Residents are more than welcome. Bridal suite is occupied. A reasonable charges plus some little extras on the side.
That actually makes a lot of sense, because his entire comedic run in Britain has basically been either roles are a lot of ham or roles that are just plain weird.
Both of those things are basically Monsieur Thénardier in a nutshell. And Matt Lucas kind of stays true to the book's original portrayal of the guy, in that he portrays Thénardier as someone who, were he not so funny, TV tropes would probably call him a complete monster.
That definitely makes a lot of sense, because he portrays a lot of that. In fact, he was famous for a series called Little Britain, which basically delved into that kind of, this really shouldn't be funny, but it is kind of humor, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, so I guess he's naturally suited to the role, and my god, he's the biggest ham. He might very well be the biggest ham in the 25th anniversary concert, which is saying something considering that Jean Valjean was portrayed by Alfie Boe, an opera singer.
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy who actually did, in the sitcom space, a perfect parody of a performance artist, shall we say. Including possibly my favourite gag. It's not finished! It's finished!
Yeah, I mean, I've seen people give Matt Lucas flack for his ability as a vocalist, but that's not as much well, for one, I saw no problems with his singing, and for two, that's not so much a problem with the Thénardiers because they are such laughable characters that you're not really supposed to take them seriously musically or in terms of acting.
That's definitely fair enough then.
So, yeah, for the Thenardiers, I give this round to Matt Lucas and Jenny Galloway in the 25th anniversary. Moving on to the Thenardiers' unfortunate biological daughter, Eponine. I could go over a lot of names for this character, but again, it's hard to match experience, and Samantha Barks has been in the role for 10 years. On top of that, she gets the character really well, and is almost unmatched as a singer, so 10 out of 10 in terms of performance.
Hey.
On my own, pretending he's beside me. All alone, I walk with him till morning. Without him, I feel his arms around me, and when I lose my way, I close my eyes, and he has found me.
I'm gonna talk more about her performance in the context of the next character, but basically, Samantha Barks has a handle on ratcheting up the feelings like few other people in the play. Well, in any play, actually. Again, it's difficult to match experience, so I give this round to both the 25th anniversary and the film. I swear casting Samantha Barks in the film was one of the few unambiguously good things they did.
Yeah, if she's the character I remember she is, I can see why you would give her that award.
Moving kind of on, because I'm going to talk more about Eponine. Marius. I'm going to be honest with you. I hate Marius. In the book, he is a self-centered ponce, and in the play, he is a love-struck idiot. And nobody who has ever played the character has managed to make me like him, except for one. But before I talk about him, I'm just going to touch for a moment on Nick Jonas, the guy they had play him in the 25th anniversary, and someone whose reputation I've been dealing with since 2009.
Oh.
I'm gonna give Nick Jonas credit. And for that matter, I'm gonna give his brothers credit. They're not bad musicians, they just play music that I don't like. In terms of vocals, I'm not gonna be as harsh toward him as a lot of people were, because Nick Jonas was not a popular choice. You can probably imagine why. But he has the same problem as all the other people who have played Marius, except worse, because he's not a professional actor.
Oh.
Which makes my personal favorite Marius a bit funny, considering his track record as a musician. In this category, I give it to Gareth Gates, in the 2011 West End production. Tell me, Jonin, are you familiar with the series Pop Idol?
I am, yes. In fact, I was about to say I have not heard that name in a long, long time.
That's because he disappeared and started doing theater. And unlike poor Nick Jonas, he pulled it off with aplomb.
Huh.
Because, I swear to you, Gareth Gates' Marius is the only Marius I have ever liked. Ever.
Wow.
Disclaimer. In the time since this review, I have since familiarized myself with the 2012 movie version of Marius a bit more, and I'll be willing to give Eddie Redmayne second place to Gareth Gates, but he still didn't make me like the character. And the reason for that is he actually plays the character with emotion.
Wow. Okay, that is... I'm not gonna lie, I think that he's pretty heartwarming, not just for the character, but just that, well, Gareth Gates has managed to do something beyond reality TV.
Yeah, and being a pop singer, unlike poor Nick Jonas. But, yeah, this is where I'm going to touch more upon Eponine, because what sold me on Gareth Gates was the way he and Samantha Barks portrayed the relationship between Eponine and Marius. Whereas most versions have Marius pretty well ignoring her completely, which is a big part of my ire toward that character, Gareth Gates and Samantha Barks actually portray them as friends. It's just that Marius is completely ignorant of her actual feelings for him.
Ah, the requited love.
Yeah, basically more of a Naruto angle on things than basically making the character look like a complete douchebag. And the fact that the two play them as friends make Eponine's death in the West End production really friggin' sad.
Oh.
Watching that was the exact moment I realized that no one will ever be able to top Gareth Gates in my head. Because while he and Samantha Barks' Eponine are singing their last song, you can actually hear Marius' voice start to break as he realizes, oh sweet Jesus, my friend is dying in my arms.
A breath away from where you are, I've come home from so far. So don't you fret, Monsieur Marius, I don't feel any pain. A little fall of rain can hardly hurt me now. I'm here. That's all I need to know.
And then she does, and after singing the last line, Marius just sits there holding her and sobbing her name. And at that point, I died with Eponine.
Wow, it's, I almost feel kind of bad saying this, but I would have never put heart-stopping, emotional, tear-jerking scenes with Gareth Gates before now.
Yeah, if I had known his track record before Les Miserables, neither would I. And as icing on the cake, Gareth Gates also does easily the best performance of Empty Chairs at Empty Tables. Speaking of emotions...
Oh, my friends, don't ask me what your sacrifice was for. Empty chairs at empty tables, where my friends will sing no more.
So, yeah, 10 out of 10 for both Gareth Gates and Samantha Barks for, in a dual effort, actually making me like the oblivious ponce that is Marius.
Wow. Definite recommendation for those two. Who's up next?
Next is the aforementioned adoptive daughter of Valjean, Cosette. And there is really no competition here because everyone who's played Cosette in the theatrical versions have had the short end of the stick because all the theatrical versions have completely cut out Cosette's character arc. For Cosette, I give it to Amanda Seyfried in the film.
Huh.
Because she actually has a character arc.
So they remove her character arc in the Vita versions then?
From what I understand, they basically just completely chopped her character down into the love interest, and completely remove all emotional depth, which puts a whole new spin on why people prefer Eponine to Cosette. I would too if that was my only experience with the character, but in the film, they actually restore her character arc from the book and give her more depth. So, kudos to them for doing that well, too.
But hey.
And speaking of the film, I now have to touch upon Cosette's mother, Fantine, the poor, destitute prostitute who ends up dying of tuberculosis and passing her daughter off to Valjean. Again, I could go into a lot of names here, but I have to give it to the film again. I'm not as familiar with the stage versions of Fantine. I know Lea Salonga played a version, which I like because Lea Salonga was Mulan. But for all the Mickey that there is to take out of the film, and there's a lot of Mickey, believe me. If there was any more Mickey, it would be Epic Mickey. But for all the Mickey there is to take out of the film, Anne Hathaway knocked it out of the park. Which surprises me, considering she has no musical theater experience.
Yeah, that is one of the things I have heard about the film, is that Anne Hathaway's performance was, what was the song? I Dream a Dream? That is the one everyone was highlighting as a great big positive of the film.
Yeah, and I have to jump on the hype train. I mean, even the nostalgia critic liked Anne Hathaway's version of I Dreamed a Dream.
Indeed.
He slept the summer by my side. He filled my days with endless wonder. He took my childhood in his stride, but he was gone when autumn came.
Everyone did, apart from Linkara in that video, but then...
Well, to be fair, there always have to be a contrarian, and it's Les Miserables. There have been so many productions of it that if you ask two different people who their favorite take on such and such character or such and such song are, they're gonna list two completely different versions you've probably never heard about.
That is very understandable, in fairness.
Yeah. Although, honorable mention to Susan Boyle on the music part for absolutely knocking that song through the roof in Britain's Got Talent.
Yeah, she did wow a lot of people with that song.
To the point that she was more or less the entire reason I got into Les Miserables. Just to go into a bit of backstory on the summary of my entire month.
Yeah, she does deserve a lot of credit, although I do, I am still fond of, I believe it was comedian Steve Punt who made the cynical observation that British public was treated to seeing Piers Morgan going teary-eyed over the revelation that unpretty women can sing.
Oh, God! Speaking of jokes about douchebag businessmen.
Yeah.
And speaking of jokes about douchebags, moving on to the kind of antagonist, kind of deuteragonist, Inspector Javert, my personal favorite character.
Ah, yes, I do know he is one of the bigger characters in the film.
Yeah, and you would not believe how difficult it was for me to choose between Philip Quast in the 10th Anniversary Edition and Norm Lewis in the 25th Anniversary Edition. Incidentally, also the only black man ever to play the role.
Huh.
And it's funny I should say that, because that's actually closer to Javert's description in the book, where he's actually described as being Romani. So, yeah, kudos to the 25th Anniversary Edition for casting kind of accurately in that regard.
I guess it's one of the weird things that happens, because I know that there are some adaptations that for some weird reason gloss over that. Like, I know in the Bond franchise, and oh god, now I think about it, it wasn't until the Daniel Craig reboot that they actually made Phoenix Lighter black like he was in the original novels.
Oh wow, I had no idea that was the original idea.
Yeah, that was one of the more awkward things amongst the Bond franchise. That and the casual sexism is part of the reason I can't watch Goldfinger anymore.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Ugh, the 60s.
But yeah, it is nice to know that some adaptations corrected that.
Yeah, and just to address the people who think that that's somehow unrealistic, I'm a history buff, so I can assure you it's not. In 1832, well, actually, even before 1832 France, Napoleon's greatest general was a black man of African immigrant descent.
Yeah, what people don't realize is that France has always had a connection with immigrants of African descent.
Yeah, and like I said, Napoleon's greatest general, Thomas Dumas, incidentally the father of Alexandre Dumas, the author of The Count of Monte Cristo, he was such an amazing military commander that whenever he was captured, Napoleon tore through half of Europe trying to get him back. So, there's a history lesson to you, folks. Black Javert has a historical precedent.
Indeed. So, is there any way of breaking the tie between the two actors, or?
I've given this thought, and I've come to a decision. First, I'll touch upon Philip Quast, who is amazing in his own right, but he plays the character in a way completely different to Hugo's original idea. Quast's Javert is sort of the archetypical smirking imperialist who lords over the streets with a reign of terror. Now, Javert had a reign of terror in the books, but he was not a smirking imperialist. In fact, I'm not sure he ever even smiled. So I have an issue with his take on the character in that regard, even though he knocked every song he ever sang as Javert into orbit. But Norm Lewis does the same thing while portraying a Javert much closer to the book, race aside. Norm Lewis portrays Javert as a terrifying, unstoppable force of nature who growls curses and swears his way into dispatching the law, and does so with the complete mental justification that he is right. He cuts a terrifying figure made more terrifying by the fact that he completely believes what he's doing.
Another brawl in the square, another stake in the air. Was there a witness to this? Well, let him speak to Javert. Monsieur, the streets are not safe, but let these vermin beware. We see that justice is done. Look upon this fine collection, crawled from underneath a stone. This swarm of worms and maggots could have picked you to the bone.
Yeah, that does sound like an impressive character, not gonna...
Yeah, and it's really funny, and I have to give Norm Lewis particular credit for this. It is really funny how he is just about the friendliest, most sunny person on the planet outside of character, but in character, his Javert makes everyone shit themselves.
That is actually surprisingly common, given how we've got stuff like Joffrey, who his actor is also very polite and never actually swears outside of his character.
Wow, that's true, actually, and that's a surprisingly good comparison, because even though Javert is sympathetic, he's still an antagonist, and again, Norm Lewis plays that aspect a lot more strongly, let's say, than most people who play the character, which again is in line with Victor Hugo, who presented Javert as someone who isn't necessarily evil, but he's made a villain of himself for the fact that what he believes is the law of a government that is wrong.
So it's basically following the law to the letter rather than the spirit.
Yeah, and again, I will give all due credit to Philip Quast as a singer. He is fantastic, but Norm Lewis matches him and completely aces the character.
Yeah, it is pretty clear-cut when you put it like that. I suppose Russell Crowe is nowhere near the standings from what I've heard.
You know, I try not to give him too much flack because he obviously tried with the character, and he's a fantastic actor. I mean, it's Russell friggin' Crowe. But he's not a theater singer, man.
Yeah, I think that's the problem because I joke around maybe to taunt Sven, but he doesn't seem as bad as the people make him out to be. I mean, granted, he kind of sticks out like a sore thumb for the rest of the singers, but it's not the worst singing I've ever heard.
No, it just kind of sounds flat and uninterested, which when you put him up to the likes of Aaron Tveit and Samantha Barks, who are amazing classically trained singers, it really sticks out like a sore thumb. Still, though, it's Russell Crowe. He's an amazing actor, and I won't stop liking him just because he turned in a dud performance once.
I think in those cases it comes down to director, because from what I've seen, this is a fairly... I don't think it's his first work, but the director of that film was still fairly new. You can kind of tell in... Now that I think about it, I tell a lie, because there was one other person I saw do a review of this movie, and it was Jacob Chapman's review of the film as part of a series they started ages ago called Hollywood Drive, which only lasted a couple of episodes, but he pointed out that part of the reason it doesn't work is because in order to replicate the intimacy of the spotlight, it uses extreme close-ups, which really should be saved for horror films.
Yeah, oh god, I'm suddenly having flashbacks to Doug Walker's review of The Langoliers. My wide-angle lens is about to break. And they had another issue in that film, in that the director insisted on using live performances of the songs, rather than dubbed-in lip-synced takes. And that was a terrible idea, for the record. Because if Russell Crowe had been put in front of a recording booth and asked to take his time, he might have done better.
If you're not trained in classic musicals, it's probably hard to do that on the spot, I guess.
And I mean, Russell Crowe is a singer, but not that kind of singer.
Yeah.
And as established, with the comparison between Nick Jonas and Gareth Gates. Very few people are able to make the transition from popular genres of music to classical genres of music with no stops in between.
Indeed, yes.
Which, incidentally, brings us to the star of the show, Jean Valjean. I'm just gonna skip ahead and say, yeah, of course my choice is Colm Wilkinson. He is Valjean. But I'm gonna touch for a moment upon Hugh Jackman, because there's a really funny story I have involving him. I didn't know he was classically trained. As it turns out, he had a career on Broadway, and his first starring role was in an adaptation of a Disney production. Which Disney production? I'll give you a hint just based on which character he played. Gaston!
Oh, wow.
And, incidentally, I think I'm one of the only people who, especially knowing that, actually likes Hugh Jackman as Jean Valjean.
It's an interesting career when you go from Gaston to Wolverine and then to Jean Valjean.
3 completely different characters, which, again, at least gives you reassurance that Hugh Jackman is a fantastic actor. Still, though, even though I appreciate his Valjean, you can't compete with the OG. And Colm Wilkinson was the first Valjean. And I mean, he has all the aspects of the character. Wisdom, anger toward the French government, anger toward law enforcement, a bit of cockiness, which is why he got caught in the first place, and more than anything, an overwhelming desire to redeem himself and to protect his adoptive daughter.
You can take, you can give, let him be, let him live. If I die, let me die, let him
Which, when I think of it, actually kind of draws a comparison between Colm Wilkinson and Liam Neeson.
Huh.
I just thought of that. A lot of the same nuances.
Indeed, yes.
But if I were to look into it, it is extremely, extremely difficult to choose between Valjeans, because inevitably they are always the best singer and the best actor in the entire show. Which makes sense because they're the star.
Yeah, I was about to say, the production would probably sink if the main performer wasn't up to scratch.
Yeah, I could nitpick and go into depth for hours choosing between Geronimo Rauch, Ramin Karimloo, John Owen Jones, Alfie Boe, but this just comes down to personal preference, and my personal preference is the cool old guy who played the original cool old guy. Colm Wilkinson, for me, stands head and shoulders above the rest.
Yep, that definitely makes the most sense. I'm probably going to have to check them out at a later date, if nothing else to provide clips for this show.
Yeah, you're going to be sorting through a lot of 25th anniversary songs, my friends. But actually, before I close off on Valjean's section, and on Javert's section, actually, massive kudos to the film for giving the world possibly the coolest version of the confrontation ever to be seen in Les Miserables. The scene where Valjean and Javert sword fight in front of Fantine's deathbed.
Whoa.
Javert finally catches up to Valjean, and they have a musical/physical confrontation. And in that one scene in the film, Russell Crowe finally shined.
Wow.
Let me just say his experience in Gladiator really paid off.
Well, I'm glad he had at least one redeeming factor in that performance.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things like Anne Hathaway's performance of I Dreamed a Dream, where everyone seems to like it. And I cannot disagree, because let's face it, Maximus versus Wolverine in a church hospital, sword fighting with a rapier and a 2x4 is pretty fucking cool.
I am warning you, and the price you have to pay. Every man is born in sin. Every man chooses his way.
Yeah, but you're definitely selling me on that scene.
I'm gonna have to link you to so much stuff once we're done.
And it's actually kind of funny because it almost links back to a scene in Thunderbolt Fantasy, but that's spoiler territory.
I'm so tempted to ask now. But the point I'm trying to make, reviewing all of these characters separately and all of the adaptations separately, is that they all do something right. I liked a lot of things about the film, personally, and that's comparing it to high-end stage productions. There's something you can find to like in every edition of Les Miserables. The core message is always there, and there's always some modicum of talent to be found.
I guess it shows the original power of the book, I guess for lack of a better term, the fact that it's considered to be such a classic that it's always given so much attention and grandiose when you're casting the characters and writing the songs, I guess.
Yeah, it's one of those things that everyone wants to get right. It is the musical, practically. Unless we're counting Disney, but that's just animated musicals.
I'd say it's the musical equivalent of Shakespeare in that it's an old text, but it's one that every director and every actor wants to get right just because of the kudos. Like, for the same reason every actor wants to knock everyone out of the park with their own interpretation of the famous to be or not to be soliloquy. I'm sure there are many actors and actors who want to make a name for themselves by getting a standout performance of the famous songs.
I mean, honestly, Bring Him Home has launched the careers of so many Valjeans that pretty well speaks for itself. And once again, to give credit to the movie and to the director of the movie, you can see it even there. I'm going to close off my review by, talking about the shot that closed off the movie, because that is where I saw the love that cast and that crew put into the work. The final shot of the 2012 movie is Valjean ascending to heaven, or whatever plane of being there is, in the company of the spirits of Fantine and the bishop who originally saved and redeemed him, and appearing on a massive barricade in 1870 with the spirits of all the characters who had died, singing a reprieve, led by Eponine and Enjolras, of Do You Hear the People Sing, as the 1870 French Revolution brings down the monarchy once and for all. That was my applause moment.
That certainly sounds like it needs some applause, yeah.
It's the only time in that movie that the word epic crossed my mind. And it was the moment I realized, okay, yeah, there were mistakes made here, but in that moment, I could tell that everyone involved, even Russell Crowe, gave nothing but their best to the movie. And that really, I think, speaks for Les Miserables as a whole. Because, as much as I joke about the political nature of it, it's one of those things that I find everyone who likes musical theater will love. No matter what they believe, religiously or politically, they will find something to appreciate in such a classic. I've seen atheists who love it despite the fact that it has a very religious message. I've seen conservatives and libertarians and hardcore left-wingers love it. It's one of those things that crosses just about any boundary so long as you like the genre.
Indeed, and I suppose that's why it's still a classic to this day.
Yep. I'm now listening to the Hamilton soundtrack because Les Miserables got me into musical theater. So it even broke the boundaries of genre for me. And for that, I think it deserves appreciation. And on that note, we've heard the people sing, and now we can move on.
Indeed. I was about to say there is absolutely no way I can top that, so let's go straight into the next section. And to the final one of the show, Quickfire Reviews.
Thank Jesus I have nothing.
This is a review of everything else we've read, watched, or played, but within the maximum time limit of 60 seconds. And in my case, it's gonna be all me, so...
The Legend of K. This is a mascot platformer that was originally released on the PlayStation 2 and then had an anniversary edition released on both Steam and the Wii U. Unfortunately, whilst I did kind of like the premise, it was Kung Fu starring furries and actually had a premise that reminded me of Fist of Fury in the fact that it's a dictatorship of rats and gorillas basically closing down martial arts schools on the pretense of training terrorist camps, but once the plot really got going, it kind of revealed that it was just a sort of really bland, average platformer, so that's kind of why I got lost in the mist of time. Plus, I should mention, this is probably just a weird thing I picked up, but I get that they were trying to make K a wisecracker, but the fact that he's calling these animals Knuckle Dracker, Banana Brain, Garbage Breath kind of makes him sound like a racist.
Ha! It's all fun and games until you realize you're playing the furry version of Donald Trump.
Oh god, he's not quite that bad in fairness.
Oh, thank Jesus.
Oh, jeez. And second game on the list?
Ninja Pizza Girl. This is one of the 4 games I've kickstarted at the time recording, and so far it's the only one that's seen completion. It's a fun little platformer that, whilst it's a little cheesy in its anti-bullying message, it expresses it in fun ways, namely being that the character's motivation actually ties into their health bar. Overall, it's probably not the best platform in the world, but if you have some free cash and you want to play a platform with a good heart, I can recommend this.
Ha! Their motivation is tied into their health bar. In other words, it's me!
And my final review for now. I've already mentioned this on Twitter, but in case you haven't seen it...
Doctor Strange, another Marvel movie that's been released recently, and honestly, it's a really enjoyable one. Namely because, since it involves magic, and actual magic this time, not sci-fi disguising itself as magic in the case of Thor, it allows for a unique and interesting take on the Marvel Universe, especially the action sequences, which, it's surprising what you can do when you decide, screw physics, we're just gonna do whatever the hell we want. And of course it is brilliantly acted, with Benedict Cumberbatch playing a really good Doctor Strange, and I also have to give credits to a very interesting final confrontation, which, again, screw physics, we can do whatever the hell we want.
And yeah, that's all the reviews I have for Quickfire Review, and this also closes out another year on Monkey Broadcast, and man, I did not expect to be educated on musical theatre, so...
Who knows, I might be able to convert someone else across genre boundaries.
Indeed. I mean, hell, we've managed to do quite a lot of interesting topics over the past years, and heck, we even saw a big manga series ending, so who knows?
Yeah, and may I add, friggin' finally!
So yeah, thank you to all of us who've been following our podcast throughout the year and sending us questions and just making the show what it is. Your support means a lot, and as always, I'll be posting content on my YouTube channel to keep you tided over the month of our absence. And hey, if you have any questions, or if you think there's something we should review, or maybe even new sections we should add to the show, then by all means, use the comment section. That's what it's there for. Until then, it's time for us to close this year out and take a break. So, until next year, I've been the Jonin Monkey.
And I've been Sven the Crusader. Wish me luck when the people sing on the 8th. It didn't work.
But they recently announced that they've leveled up. Okay.
How appropriate.
Oh god, damn mobile. This time round... god damn it. PSA kids, when you know you're going to be recording a podcast later on today, don't try experimenting with complex larynx positions and a Keith David impression.
Okay then. Our next question is brought to you by puberty.
And that's really... and that's all the sentences I can speak.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you've already reviewed it once on this channel, but I finally got a chance to actually... My pen just went flying across the room.
And this... Oh dear, thoughts already failing me. Come on.
Back to the surface.
This is the section where we review everything else we've read, watched, or played. No, wrong section. Down.
Quickfire Reviews!
This is a section where I desperately get drink. None of the royals particularly want to fight, especially not against Farin, but Damn it, this is the problem of naming your character just a few letters differently from the canon name, but, indeed, as always, thanks... God damn it.
We're nearly there.
Halfway through, I suddenly realised, why do I keep saying indeed? But I had an existential crisis halfway through speaking, which is never a good idea. Anyway.
I feel that pain deep in my soul.
That was Monkey Broadcast, a monthly review and discussion show hosted by the Jonin Monkey and Sven the Crusader. If you feel you've been the subject of slander or that your copyright was misused, send an email to thejoninmonkey@yahoo.co.uk. For more news and media reviews, follow me on Twitter @thejoninmonkey, and go to thejoninmonkey.podbean.com for previous podcasts and MP3 downloads. All music used belongs to the original owners. This year's ending theme was Apogi, a cover of Last Battle Decision, part of OC Remix's Summoning of Spirits album. Monkey Broadcast will be back at the end of January. Until then, have fun, kids!